The following program was paid for by the friends and partners of WLMB-TV 40 Toledo.
Chaos is normal. Complexity is the rule of the day. And if we're trying to eliminate the chaos and eliminate the complexity, I think we start spinning our wheels more than maybe is necessary. And what we really need is a skill set that enables us to navigate the complexity, not eliminate the complexity, because we just can't.
In this fast-paced and constantly changing world, life can seem complicated and chaotic. So how do we navigate through it and make smart choices? Well, today we have with us Dr. Matthew Kutz, author and professor at Bowling Green State University, and he's here to share his insight and practical tools to not only survive the chaos, but to thrive and be influential leaders amongst our peers. Well, welcome, Matt.
Thanks.
It's great to have you here.
It's lovely to be here.
Well, you know, you authored this book, Contextual Intelligence. Now, some might say contextual intelligence. You know, what do you mean by that?
What is contextual intelligence? Well, it's based on obviously two key words: context and intelligence. So context is the environment we live in, and not only just the environment, but all the variables and all the influences that affect the environment that we're in. So not only our attitudes, our behaviors, our experiences, but the experiences, attitudes, politics, religious views, faith backgrounds, all of those things influence how we behave in any given environment. Whether you have faith or don't have faith, it's a huge influence on environment. So how do you diagnose that environment, recognize what it is, that's the context, and then the intelligence piece is responding appropriately once you make that diagnosis of what's going on around you and the influence and the baggage that people bring with them and you carry with you in that context.
So it's kind of, you know, using your experiences and what's going on around you to make good choices.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
All right, so why did you decide to write this book?
Well, it's kind of funny. My background has been one where I've been traveling around quite a bit. I've lived in Florida, I've lived in Texas, lived in Rwanda, just got back from Australia. Cool. I've done a lot of great stuff, and in all that traveling, I've had several different careers even, where I served as a clinician in a sports medicine athletic training environment, working in hospitals and clinics. I served in ministry for several years and in academics now, teaching and directing athletic training programs and leadership education programs, and all of these different settings and industries was just a crazy experience for me. And I realized one of the things that I needed to have was the ability to navigate these different environments successfully. And I thought, well, if I'm having trouble with it, maybe other people are too. So I started doing some research and some backgrounds, and a spinoff of my dissertation actually on some of the leadership behaviors that people need when they change environments.
All right, so what are you hoping readers take away from this book?
Well, what I want them to understand is that chaos is normal. Complexity is the rule of the day. And if we're trying to eliminate the chaos and eliminate the complexity, I think we start spinning our wheels more than maybe is necessary. And what we really need is a skill set that enables us to navigate the complexity, not eliminate the complexity, because we just can't. Right. The world is too complex with globalization, with technology, with all the places we're coming and going, and the fast pace that life is now. It's almost silly to kind of think it can be completely eliminated. So we have to develop a skill set to navigate that chaos and complexity and even embrace it as a useful tool to help us.
All right, so where did you get the idea of contextual intelligence?
Well, that's a great question and a fun one for me to answer, because the original idea actually came from a Sunday school class that I was teaching in 10 years ago, maybe more than that actually. But what I was teaching on the sons of Issachar, and there's a scripture in 1 Chronicles chapter 12 where David was becoming king at Hebron, and there was the coronation, and the kingdom was being torn away from Saul, if you remember the story, and being given to David, and this was David's coronation. And in that story, each of the 12 tribes come to David and offer him bring with them some skill set, some ability, archers, charioteers, soldiers, different things to help make that transition a success. So I was talking in the context of successfully transitioning during change. coming into a new reality like David was. And one of the tribes was the sons of Issachar. And what they brought was knowledge of the time so that Israel knew what they ought to do. And I was teaching on that. What's the knowledge of the times, and what did they do with that knowledge? And I made that just a passing kind of serendipitous statement or phrase to the class. They kind of had contextual intelligence, and they kind of went, ooh, what's that mean, and what's that? And I began to explain, well, it's what the sons of Issachar did. They discerned the times, which is actually the easy part. Knowing if an environment is good or bad is kind of the easy thing to discern. But once you make that diagnosis or discernment, what do you do with that information? All right, so this is a bad place. What do I do now? Or this is a healthy, thriving place. What do I do? And our response is dictated by that diagnosis of the environment. So that's what I think Issachar was doing, and what the skills that they brought David to help make that transition successful. And so that's where the idea came from, and it just kind of stuck with me and spun. It just so happened that at that time I was working on my dissertation, and I had all these leadership behaviors, and again, all the empirical evidence that you need for a scientific inquiry was in place, and I needed a name to call this construct that I had discovered or identified, and I called it contextual intelligence.
And so within it, you talk about leadership, and right. So then, how does it differ from other leadership models?
Yeah, it really is. It really is a leadership model. But more than that, it's about decision making and making wise decisions in real time. You know, all of us have that experience where we think of the perfect thing to say, we think of the perfect action to take well after the incident that we needed that information for is over. Like, oh, I should have said this. If I would have said this, it would have been perfect. And it's too late, you know? So the contextual intelligence actually helps us bring that gap closer together so that I can actually think and respond well in real time. This is a tremendous leadership skill set. One of the things that makes it different from other things is actually that. It's what I call the 3D thinking. And 3D thinking is something that it's really exciting for me because in the contextual intelligence model, there are 12 specific behaviors. And that's the research part of it, the part that's in the academic journals. Are the 12 behaviors that a contextually intelligent person demonstrates. But those 12 behaviors then are based in this 3D thinking model, which was what makes it unique, because 3D thinking is about using your hindsight, which is your understanding of the past and your experiences, your insight, which is what's going on right now in real time in the environment that you're actually in right in the moment, and then foresight, which is your appreciation and understanding of the future. So you bring those three things together and begin to think past, present, future, or hindsight, insight, foresight, and it gives you now a different perspective that most people just don't have, because most people rely on hindsight almost exclusively.
Well, you know, speaking of hindsight and looking back, I know that I saw your TEDx talk where you talk about the Vulcan death grip, and first coming to recognition of using context and using that 3D thinking,
right.
Past, present, and future. So maybe you could share that with our viewers.
Yeah, it was. That's been a really interesting experience, and so that actually kind of. When I begin to think about this contextual intelligence model, and even before that I taught this class, I had an experience that really encapsulates what all this means. And it happened when I was around 12 years old. I don't remember exactly when, but I came home from school one day and wanted to do my normal routine, which was drop my bags at the door, get a snack, and run out and play baseball in the backyard.
Like any typical
exactly right. I mean, that was the standing routine. And this particular day, I dropped my bag, following thing, my mom was waiting there at the door to say, yeah, sorry, son, you're not playing ball today. You didn't do your chores before school. So not only do you not get to play ball, you got to do your chores, and you got to do the discipline extra chores for not doing your chores. So I've got now. My day is ruined, I've got this full day of work ahead of me, so I'm bitter and angry. And I said something under my breath to my mom that I probably obviously shouldn't have said, and kind of just back-talked her, just whatever, Mom, and rolled my eyes and stormed off towards my room. What I wasn't aware of is that my dad was home today after school. Most days he was never home after school, he was still at work. Well, today he was home and he heard this exchange. And so he comes running out of the kitchen as fast as he could, and he applies the Vulcan death grip, grabs me right here on the shoulder and gets the nerve right there in my arm twitching, and he's got me right there. And that's a consequence of my dad being a huge Star Trek fan. You know, our whole lives, we watched every episode. And so we practiced on him, he practiced on us. So the Vulcan Death Grip was this thing we did in our family. Anyways, he got it. Nailed me right there, walked me over to the wall, and got right in my face, you know, close to my face, and said to me, "Don't you ever talk to my wife like that again." Now, what was earth-shattering to me about that revelation was, that's his wife. Who's his wife?
Right,
you know,
to you, it's like, that was mom.
Right, I know, it never occurred to me in my wildest dreams that my mom was something other than just my mom, that she was his wife. And so he's got me there against the wall, and I guess part of the humorous part of the story is, you know, he's got me there against the wall, and he says, "Don't you ever talk to my wife like that again." And that's all. I mean, literally, it's like echoing in my brain. I mean, I remember this, like just echoing, my mom, my wife. He said, my wife. Oh my goodness, this isn't fair. He's changing the rules, kind of thing. And then he says, and if you do this, he realizes he's probably getting too serious. So my dad has a great sense of humor, and he's like, and if you do it again, we'll kill you. And nobody will know you're gone because we can make another one that looks just like you. You know, so that's my dad being funny, and I'm just like, okay, I missed right over my head, but, you know, so anyways, he sends me to my room. I have to do all the chores, and I remember thinking as I'm sulking the rest of the day doing these chores, if the wife thing freaked me out, but if it was my uncle who was here and the situation repeated itself, he would have said my sister. If it was my grandfather, he would have said my daughter. And I started going through all these people and realizing, oh my goodness, this woman who I just thought was my mom is way more than just my mom. And not only that, mom's probably not even her main role. Because my dad told me later on, listen, son, she was my wife well before she was your mother. You're a passing phase here. You know, we love you and we support you, and they do. I have fantastic parents. But you know, I was with your mom before you came along, and I'm with her after you're leaving. So this is our, and it blew my mind, because my world, it was just my mom, and whatever else didn't matter. Having that insight. Now, I, of course, didn't have all that insight in that moment when I was 12. This is after years of thinking about it, writing the book, different things, I begin to realize that's a perfect example of what it means to have contextual intelligence. We have to be aware that everybody around us is more than just what we know them as. And if we begin to see people that way and understand the influences that influence who they are, the variables that influence their life, what they bring to the table, for example, what they bring skill-wise, experience-wise, attitude-wise, all of those things, it changes how I interact with them, because that changed how I interacted with my mom. And I didn't become the perfect teenager overnight, and never did, actually.
No.
But you know, but it did. It changed how I interacted with her. It changed how I interacted with other people's moms, other women, and even how I expect my son to treat my wife, and all these kinds of things. And it brings a different perspective. And that is an incredible leadership skill that organizations and companies literally around the world, I've been very blessed to do a lot of traveling on this area all over the planet, and are finding, our company, our people, they need to know this. So.
All right. Well, we will talk a little bit more about contextual intelligence and how to recognize when we see it, but we'll be right back.
After that, he kind of said to me, he leaned over and said, you know, this was great stuff, and I appreciate it. This is going to help my team. It's going to help my staff. But what's most compelling to me is if I had known this stuff 20 years ago, I wouldn't be divorced right now.
Now, back to Main Street.
I'm here with Dr. Matthew Kutz, and we are talking about contextual intelligence. And so, Matt, maybe we could talk about now how we recognize contextual intelligence when we see it.
Sure. The best thing to look for when somebody is demonstrating contextual intelligence is how well they respond to stress. How well they maybe now let me change. Maybe not stress, because we all respond, but in an unexpected change situation, even an expected change situation, when the environment is shifting around you, how well do you navigate and flow between those kinds of changes in context? Do you get extremely frazzled and frustrated and need to take time off, which isn't bad? And I don't want to imply that we shouldn't be thinking about our response or action like that, but that there is something to be said for an unexpected or even an anticipated change happening, and how well you're resilient to that change and how well you respond and adapt. So that's one big thing, is people respond and adapt really well, which implies then, or requires, that they even recognize that the situation has changed, which is something else, because in my research and in my consulting work, I find quite a bit, or I'm surprised quite often at how people actually don't know something just changed.
Right,
you know,
yes.
The environment, something just did, you know, they feel that the tension is increased or something shift, but they don't know where that came from. And that's what the contextually intelligent person is really good at, recognizing not only that the shift has happened, but what was the cause of that shift, what helped that shift. So those are just two simple ways to kind of gauge really quickly if this person is practicing contextual intelligence or not.
Well, you know, we experience a lot of changes in life, and,
Right.
and people will often say, you know, things are just so chaotic or complicated. But you talk about the difference between complexity and complications.
Yes, and
Maybe you could explain
that's
that.
a huge difference. And one of the things is we say things like life is complicated, and I even say in the book, I am here to tell you life is not complicated. And everyone's like, what? What do you mean it's not complicated? It's not. It's complex. And the difference is huge. It's not just semantics. When you think about a complicated system versus a complex system, you're dealing with two completely different entities. So a complicated system is one that's mechanistic, one that's, to use a metaphor of a complicated system, you maybe think of a car engine, for example, where it has many parts and many pieces, and they all fit together, and they need to fit together well, and we judge our success on how well these pieces are working together. We even say things like we're a well-oiled machine, or we're firing on all cylinders, and that metaphor speaks to the way we perceive reality, meaning that, all right, if something in the car engine breaks, I can just take that piece out and put a new piece in. We can't solve problems like that. The world isn't complicated like that, where we can just isolate and quarantine all the pieces and all the variables and just fix one at a time. It's complex. So complexity then also has many variables and many parts, but and the difference is it can't be reduced down. So it's called irreducible complexity. So for example, an example of that would be Play-Doh. Imagine that I have several different colors of Play-Doh, and I mash them all together, and I mash them together. Eventually, I get a different color of Play-Doh. So if I have yellow and blue Play-Doh and mash them together, I get green Play-Doh. All the blue Play-Doh is still there, and all the yellow Play-Doh is still there, but now it's become integrated together to a new whole. That's complex, meaning I can't get the blue Play-Doh back out. I can mix it together and say, oh no, Virginia, can you please, I need that blue Play-Doh back. My son has a science fair project and he needs the blue Play-Doh. It's like, sorry, it's not coming back. Or even another metaphor of complexity would be a cake. You got eggs and flour and sugar and milk and, you know, all the stuff that goes in it. And once it goes in and it's baked, you can't take it out. Oh no, I need those 2 eggs back. I forgot. And you can't. It doesn't. That's a complex system. And that's how life and organizations really are. So if we're trying to solve problems on a complicated framework in the way we view the world, it's never going to work, because that's not the environment that we're in. And one of the reasons why, and actually in 2013, the book won an award for innovation and cutting edge leadership perspective, which I was excited about. And I asked the committee and all that, how did it win an innovation award and cutting edge perspective? And they said it was that concept, that the idea that the business world, the organizational world, the decision-making models that we use in life are based on theories and ideas from the 60s, from the 40s, 80s, research on that, and when the world was completely different than it is now. And now that the world has changed, it's no longer complicated. See, the world used to be complicated. And when all the emerging theories about business and management came to being, the world was complicated, but now it's complex. It's integrated to the point where it can't be reduced. And so it gives a new perspective.
And so then, you know, you had talked about 3D thinking earlier, and so that kind of plays into that whole thought.
Very
Yeah, so
much.
maybe you could give us an example of that.
Yeah, so how does this work? And 3D thinking is kind of the variable or the framework that brings us all together. How do I begin to start thinking of the world as complex as opposed to complicated? Well, the answer is 3D thinking. We use our experiences differently. differently. That's synchronicity. We use a tacit knowledge, which is the way we gather information. That's different. How do we use that? And the best way to explain that is 3D. To give you an example of 3D thinking in action. So I call this 3D thinking free fall, and I ask this question everywhere I go, and I've literally asked this question to thousands of people in about 6 different countries, and I get the same answer everywhere. And I ask them, where are you at and what are you doing when you have your most creative, most brilliant, cutting-edge ideas? And they shout all these things out, and every time I get 5 responses. I'm in the bathroom. I'm on a walk or on a jog, ready to fall asleep, these kind of mindless things. Every time I get these same answers.
So you're not sitting at your desk?
No.
Typing away, staring into a computer?
Exactly, that's the beauty of it. It's funny, it dawned on me after thousands of responses, no one ever said at work. When I'm being paid to have good ideas.
I think I'm going to need a couple days off here.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I should tell Jamie that.
Yeah, do it, because
that's some real good thinking
right.
done.
And that's what I tell CEOs everywhere and managers everywhere. Listen, the best ideas happen when they're in this 3D thinking free fall. So I go back and I ask them, all right, so when you're thinking, when you have these great ideas, you're in the shower, or for example, what are you thinking about? And they all say, or most of them say, well, nothing. I'm like, really? You're thinking about nothing? And I begin to ask him, or is it more something like this? You're thinking about what you've got to do today at work, which reminds you of something that happened yesterday, which reminds you, thing yesterday reminds you, oh, that you wore that red thing, so don't wear that red thing again today, which reminds you of something happened in junior high school, of this incident you had with the red shirt in the cafeteria. And then you're thinking about, I remember, when I go on vacation, I remember seeing the sunset and it was red. And then you think about a vacation that you want to have, which reminds you of a vacation you didn't have, and how you're saving money for the future. And yeah, they go like, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm all over the place. So really what you're doing is you're practicing 3D thinking. You're thinking of the past, you're thinking of the present, and you're thinking of the future, and you're thinking of it all simultaneously together. And in the midst of that, these great ideas strike you. It's not random, accidentally, poof, this magical moment of insight happened. No, what you're doing is you are drawing from experiences from your past, from your present, and what we call anticipated memories of your future, and you're bringing insight into the moment, and you're having these great ideas when you allow yourself to think in 3D.
Well, you have so many wonderful ideas, and so I want to let people know where they can pick up your book, find out more about you, and maybe pursue having you speak.
Yeah.
So how can people connect?
So my email, I think it's on the screen there somewhere. It's mkutz@bgsu.edu, but also I have a website, matthewkutz.com.
One last thing, because I remember you telling me the story of, after you'd spoken at a Fortune 500 event, because it just made such an impact on somebody, and and the ideas that you share. How are people benefiting from these ideas?
Well, obviously the organizational side is benefiting huge, but one of the things that has been a tremendous blessing and testimony for me is so I gave this talk at this huge Fortune 50 organization, and they loved it. And the guy was walking me out to my car after the event, and it's all the formalities. But after that, he kind of said to me, he leaned over and said, this was great stuff. And I appreciate it. This is going to help my team. It's going to help my staff. But what's most compelling to me is if I had known this stuff 20 years ago, I wouldn't be divorced right now. And to me, that was a tremendous endorsement even of how we can navigate our environments better, not just in business, not just in organizations. It works for that. But even in our lives and our daily relationships, which is where we actually maybe need the most contextual intelligence.
All right. Well, thank you, Matt. We appreciate you being here today.
Thanks.
And folks, I want to encourage you to go out there, get that book, Contextual Intelligence, check out his website. And thank you, and we'll be right back.
Now, back to Main Street.
Well, I appreciate today's guest, Dr. Matthew Kutz, as he shared with us how the Lord has worked in his life and through teachings in the Bible now gives others wise counsel to help them make the best choices. Well, God, has given us a roadmap in life, and, that would be our Bible. So praise the Lord, because without it, I would be lost. If we take a look at James chapter 1, we read, "If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind." We gain wisdom through studying God's Word, and it's there that we find out what God has to say about wisdom and knowledge and how to use them and navigate through life. So as you come upon choices today and using your contextual intelligence, be sure to turn to God's Word and let Him guide your way. Thank you for watching Main Street today. We would love to get your feedback. You can visit us on our website at WLMB.com or on social media, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at WLMB-TV40.
We hope that Main Street has been a blessing to you today. Please feel free to contact the following to learn more about the topics discussed on today's show. WLMB would like to thank all the faithful supporters of WLMB that make this program possible.